Kuzuzampo and a very good evening to all our viewers. This is BBS Channel 2 and I am Karma Dendrup, your host for the next 1 hour. This is your weekly dose of Buddhism, the Jangchub Shing. For those of you who are watching this program for the first time, what we do on this show is we discuss Buddhist truths in an effort to better comprehend the vast and timeless Buddha Dharma. For those of you who are not familiar, now BBS Channel 2 is 24/7, so should you miss any of our programs, then you can catch the programs the following day. For our program schedule, log on to our website www.bbs.bt/bbs2. Without further ado, the premise of the dialogue on this program is Buddhism, obviously, gross national happiness and education. Our guest speaker on this episode is esteemed Dr. Vinh Tho. Currently, Doctor is the program director at the Gross National Happiness Center in Bhutan. In this capacity, he oversees the implementation of a call to care, a curriculum aiming at developing compassion right from kindergarten to the university level in all the schools of Bhutan and in Vietnam. He is also the founder and chairman of Eurasia Foundation, a humanitarian NGO developing education programs for children and youth living with disabilities, as well as ecological projects in Vietnam. Previously, he served as the head of training, learning and development at the International Committee of the Red Cross in Geneva. He is a Buddhist teacher in the tradition of the Vietnamese Zen Buddhism, ordained by world-famous Zen master Thich Nhat. Dr. Vinh Tho has been a professor of education at several universities in Europe and Vietnam. He has published several books and many articles on topics including curative education, engaged spirituality, intercultural dialogue, adult education and humanitarian action, intriguing topics and fields that I would like to question Doctor about. He holds a PhD in psychology and education from the University of Geneva. Last Doctor, welcome to the Jangchub Shing.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Before we begin, any opening remarks from Doctor?
Yes, as an opening remark, I would like to remind our viewers and our team here that today is Happiness Day. 3 years ago, the United Nations has declared the 20th of March to be the World Happiness Day. And that was actually due to the impact that gross national happiness had in the world community. So Happiness Day is a very special day, I believe, in Bhutan and for the rest of the world, where we are reminded that one of the most important goals in human life is not economic growth, not riches, not outer success, but truly inner happiness.
What an auspicious coincidence. My first question to Doctor, as has now turned out to be a Jangchub Shing tradition and a signature question, is who is the Buddha?
To me, the Buddha can be seen in 3 different ways. First of all, it is obviously a historic figure, the great enlightened being who founded Buddhist tradition, sometimes before 5 BC or so in northern India. Secondly, I would say Buddha is like a universal principle of wisdom and compassion that is really transcending historic limitation. And thirdly, the Buddha is within ourselves as our own capacity of awakening, our own capacity of developing our wisdom, our compassion, our enlightened mind, or awakening mind, bodhicitta. So these are for me the 3 main aspects, I would say, of the Buddha.
For Doctor, what is the Dharma?
The Dharma is the way to live our life so that we bring happiness and well-being to ourselves and to others, that we avoid causing harm and creating suffering for ourselves or others. The Dharma is all the wisdom of the universe. It's a way to express the wisdom of our universe in such a way that is understandable for us human beings. So fundamentally, it is a path of practice.
Yes.
And in Buddhism, I believe, wisdom plays a big role because it's not liberation through faith, but liberation through understanding. So the Dharma is what helps us gain this understanding.
A follow-up on this would be, Doctor spoke about the practice. When Doctor speaks about Dharma as practice, what are you speaking about?
I'm thinking and speaking about two different aspects of the practice. One aspect is formal practice, like practicing meditation, chanting, praying, rituals, and so forth. Formal practice, which of course is very important because that's what trains our mind. Nice. But for me, even more importantly, is practice in daily life. Because what sense does it make if my practice is only when I'm sitting in front of my shrine in the morning, evening, or whenever, or in the temple for an auspicious day, and then in my daily life with my family, in my organization, with my society, I'm not actually putting into practice what I'm chanting about or preaching about or reading about. So it's really how do you have a harmony, an alignment between the concepts, the ideas, the wisdom, and then the way we actually conduct our daily lives.
Doctor is a teacher in the tradition of Vietnamese Zen Buddhism. What is Zen Buddhism and how is it similar or different from the kind of Buddhism that we have here in Bhutan?
Well, Zen Buddhism, as is currently known, that's actually a Japanese word, comes all the way back to the Buddha in himself. Nice. So that was one of the teaching that the Buddha gave, which was a silent teaching, teaching from heart to heart. Nice. And this tradition continued and moved from India to China through the great master Buddha Dharma, who was the founder of the Chan tradition, which is the original name of the Chan, meaning actually meditation, right? So Zen is Japanese for Chan, Chan is Japanese for dhyana in Sanskrit, which means meditation. So it's a meditation school. It's the school that emphasizes the practice of meditation as the main practice of the school. It belongs to the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, so this we have in common with the Vajrayana tradition that is in Bhutan. Yes. And I've even heard scholars saying that Bodhidharma actually passed through Bhutan on his way to China. So I'm not sure about it, but some scholars think that it's the case. So it's earlier, of course, than Vajrayana Buddhism. Vajrayana Buddhism started with Guru Rinpoche in the 8th century, and Bodhidharma was, quite earlier. I would say that all our basic understanding and Dharma and teaching are the same, because we are both Vajrayana and Zen Buddhism are Mahayana Buddhism. So with the emphasis of serving all sentient beings, Bodhisattva ideal, Bodhicitta, all these things are in common. The practices themselves are a little bit different. Of course, they're also culturally different because Zen Buddhism was developed in China, Japan, Vietnam, Korea, while Vajrayana Buddhism in the Himalayan region, so the cultural aspect is different. And some of the practices are a little bit different, but the ultimate goal is definitely the same. And I would say that Zen Buddhism is very similar to practices like Dzogchen or Mahamudra. So, experiencing directly the nature of the mind.
Yes, Doctor. One thing which came to mind while the doctor was speaking about Zen Buddhism and about the similarities is the fact that a thing that is personal to me as well, because with my show what I'm trying to promote is what they call a non-sectarian movement, in a sense, Rime tradition. And I've had guests who argue the fact that we shouldn't really even call the schools of Vajrayana Buddhism as in Kagyu Nyingma as sects, because that would have a different meaning coming from a Christian history. So any opinions that Doctor can share with us about people who see different school of thoughts of Buddhism as almost another religion or another practice? What is Doctor's opinion on this topic?
I think it is very important to go back to the Buddha's original teachings. Yes. And then when we do that, we realize that we all have a very similar common ground. Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, and so on. Yes. The idea of enlightenment, awakening, and all this, wisdom and compassion, or wisdom and skillful means, all these very fundamental concepts yes. are common to all Buddhist schools. Then the various Buddhist schools, in the way I see it, they are really skillful means. So it means people are different. So you need to approach people in different ways. So it will attract them, it will speak to them, it will be accessible to them, to their culture, to the time they are living in, and so on and so forth.
Now we spoke about Buddhism. I would like to get a little bit personal with Doctor. I mean, given the vast experience that I spoke to the viewers about, I mean, Doctor's worked with the International Red Cross. You've been in war zones. From what I've seen, you share experiences on YouTube as well. So if Doctor can share something about anything that comes to mind, a recollection or a milestone that you would like to share with us and that we could benefit from.
Okay, I will start with an event that happened when I was a very young man. I was 18 years old, so that's a long time ago because I'm an old man now. And at that time, you know, my background is my father is Vietnamese and my mother is French. So I grew up in a Vietnamese family, and it was a so-called Buddhist family, although my family was not really practicing, so I was not really very connected with Buddhism as a child. And we were traveling in many countries. My father was a diplomat, so I was not really exposed that much to Buddhism. Yes. And in 1969, I was 18 years old. I was supposed to go back to Vietnam. And at that time, the war was raging in Vietnam, very violent. And so when we came to Thailand, my father told me, you should better not go back to Vietnam because otherwise you will be drafted in the army. Yes. And so instead of that, I went to Nepal. 1969, Nepal was very different from Nepal today. It had just opened, and very few foreigners, very traditional culture. And I decided to go for a pilgrimage in the Himalayas in a place called Kosei Kunda, which is like a place where there are 108 lakes, very sacred place in the Himalayas. And on the way to this pilgrimage, at that time, no trekking tours, no guides, nothing, you know, just we went off. I was with a group of friends. And for some reason, I got lost. I was on my own and I lost my way. Nice. And I really thought I would die because I'd lost my way, no one around, no idea where I was. You know? And so this experience, I would call it a near-death experience, was very important in my life because it made me realize the, you know, the impermanence of life. Suddenly, because we all know we will die sometime, but it's very abstract. Yes, yes. But at that moment, I realized maybe it's today for me.
It was almost like a plane going down and you are inside the plane and then it hits you that
exactly.
It's really going to happen now.
Exactly, that was the feeling. Yes. And this was really, it shook me, right? And it made me think, okay, so what's really important for me? You know, knowing that maybe this is the last day of my life. What is really important? So it was like a turnaround in my values. Until then, I was 18, thinking of career, studies, family, whatever. And suddenly, there was a shift. So that was a starting point, realizing impermanence and the impermanence of my own life, of my own body and so on. It really changed my mindset. And well, obviously I didn't die, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. And actually it was very interesting because an old, like a wandering lama, like a Gomchen, passed by. Just a few hours later saw me, was very surprised to see me there and took me along to a village, so I was rescued. And then I met my first teacher was actually a Tibetan Rinpoche who had just fled from Tibet. Now the interesting thing is I don't remember his name. At that time I was not at all familiar with Tibetan names, but he was my first teacher, only a few days, but he was the first one to teach me how to practice meditation. So that was a very strong impact. So that's maybe a first strong, if you want, experience that gave a different direction to my life. And from then on, I always ask myself, what is really important? You know, the day I will be on my deathbed and I look back on my life, what would I want to see? You know, what would have been really important? And definitely it was not how much did I earn, what title did I have, what social position. This is all gone. Yeah, but was I a good human being? Yeah? Did I do good? Nice. Did I avoid doing evil? And things like that. Then you say, oh, yeah, that's really important.
When Doctor is sharing this, what comes to mind is, I keep sharing this on our Jangchub Shing page, a quote that Jitin Milarepa is supposed to have said. He said, what is your religion? And he said, my religion is to live and die without regret. And I was like, it's easy to sort of convince yourself to live without regret, but to die without regret, exactly. It's another question altogether. Doctor, any other milestones? Because what I would like to, this might be sounding like I'm coaxing it out of Doctor, but I read this one incident that Doctor had in a war zone somewhere in the Middle East, where you were a bit biased with the army personnel there, right. And how, you know, an episode with him, an exchange of conversation or a moment that you spend with him, and how that affected you as well. And I feel it's beneficial for our viewers if we could hear about that experience from doctor, because many a times we are so locked up with labels and uniforms and borders and nationalities that we tend to not see the human being behind that.
Yes, yeah, I'm happy to share that. It was in one of my first prison visits working with the International Committee of the Red Cross. One of the tasks of the Red Cross is to visit war prisoners in war zones. So I was in the Middle East and I was visiting a military prison. And it was a military prison in the middle of the desert, very hot. And I had spent the whole morning having one-to-one interviews with the detainees, because the Red Cross has this privilege that they are allowed to have what is called interview without witness, so that they can speak frankly without having some guards or soldiers listening in. And so they were sharing their stories, and there were terrible stories of, abuse and torture and, really terrible stories. The youngest prisoner was about 15 and the eldest was in his late 70s.
Nice.
So it was very sort of a heavy experience, and the prison cells are very smelly and they are very dark places, and you feel it's a horrible atmosphere, And then after having spent the whole morning in this prison cell, I went out to rest and breathe some fresh air, and a young soldier came up to me and started speaking with me. Now, the whole morning I heard from the prisoners how the soldiers were abusing the prisoners and so on. So when this young man came up to me, I felt very reluctant even to engage with him. But he was really sort of insisting. He wanted to speak with me, and I was a bit surprised, and because, to be frank, what I saw was a military uniform, a machine gun, and for me it was like the image of the, of the abuser, of the, of the oppressor, so the bad guy, right? and so I was reluctant to engage with him. But he continued speaking with me, and at one point he told me, "Do you think I'm an evil person?" And then I was quite shocked, because I realized that actually, yes, I thought he was an evil person, but I didn't know this man, young man. Then I asked him, "How old are you?" And he said, "I'm 22." And that's younger than my own son was at that time. Nice. So I thought, oh my God, this could be my son, And obviously, when you're in a country at war, you don't choose whether you want to become a military or not. It's just, they take you and that's it. They draft you and you have to become a soldier, and you cannot have no choice. And it was, so it started, I felt a shift inwardly. I thought, I have to open up and listen. And then he started telling me, well, actually, he's finished his studies. He would like to become a social worker. Back home, he's working with youth. And he was a really nice young man, And I had not been able to see that because I had been blinded by the label, by the uniform, by my mind projection of who he is, rather than seeing the real person. And that was very humbling, because at that time I've been already a practicing Buddhist for many years. I was already, ordained Dharma teacher, and I realized it's easy to preach, open your mind, overcome your prejudices, and so on. But in the situation, I was not able to do it. Yes. So, it was a very humbling experience. And I thought, that's a very deep lesson, Yes. I cannot, when I meet someone, just keep with the outer appearance or the title or the name or the religion or the, whatever, the form, but look beyond that to the true being, So how can I pretend that I want to awaken the Buddha nature in myself if I'm not able to see it in the person I'm speaking with?
Yes, that's beautiful, Doctor. And I got to get a taste of what what the transformative experience must have been for Doctor, and I hope the audience as well can draw from Doctor's experience, because so many a times, we are so locked up. We look at parents and we don't see a woman or a man behind it. We tend to see our dad, mom, labels, and we can't really connect with people. And thank you, Doctor, for that. Any other milestone that anything that comes to mind that Doctor would like to share with us?
Another experience maybe that actually was one of the reasons why I later decided to go to Bhutan was during my time at the Red Cross. I was in Darfur, in West Sudan, a country that has gone through a tremendous civil war. 2 million people died there. At that time when I was there, it was a very terrible situation. We had feeding centers for mothers and children. Many children were dying because the mothers were so undernourished that they could not feed the babies. Yes. The situation was so desperate, and we were trying our best to help, but it was very limited. And experiencing this, I really asked myself, well, what are the causes of this suffering? You see, as you know, in the Buddhism there's suffering, but there's the causes of suffering, the second noble truth. So I said it's good to try to alleviate some suffering, but if I don't understand what is the cause, the root cause of the suffering, this help is very superficial. And when I looked at the situation, I realized in the case of Darfur, the cause is very clear. It's ecological problem. It was water shortage. Yes. Because of climate change, this region, which is near the Sahara, has become drier. And then you have two peoples living there. Some peoples are farmers and they need water for their crops, and some peoples are nomads and they need water for their cattle. Now, waters had always been a little bit short, and there had been little, fights, but nothing very serious. But due to the climate change, the water shortage had become dramatic. And then, actually, when you look at the maps, where are the wars? Usually they are there where there's oil production. Middle East, and you just look at the world map with the crisis zones, and you'll see it's mostly connected with oil production, because there's not enough resources and people are fighting for the resources. But when the resource that is missing will be water, and this is coming up now with the climate change, the wars will be extremely violent, because you can live without oil, not as comfortably, but you can live. Yes. But without water, you cannot even live 1 week. You will die within a few days. So I realized that, behind this violence, the violence was just the tip of the iceberg. Behind that, there were structural problems, systemic problems, that we have built up a world system, an economic system that is destroying the planet and that is fundamentally unfair. And I thought, as long as we don't change the system itself, we will not be able to solve the problems of violence and of wars. So that was for me like an eye-opener, more on not so much on a personal, more on a global scale, where I thought, so what are the alternatives to the current economic system?
Doctor did give me a taste, a glimpse of one of the reasons, one of the factors that influenced you. One could call it the seed of you coming towards Bhutan. But from working at the International Red Cross, how do we find ourselves sitting here and sharing this conversation, Doctor? How did you come to work for the GNH Center?
Well, this is very directly connected with what I just mentioned. So that was just one example. But there were many situations where I realized, although humanitarian work is good and necessary, in the same way, then emergency is good in medicine, right? Yes. If somebody has an acute illness, you need to have emergency ward, and it's very good and helpful. But it is even more important to have preventive medicine. How do you keep people in good health in the first place? So if you see that on planetary level, then you ask yourself, okay, if you have conflicts, it's like acute sickness, then you have to intervene as a humanitarian worker, RCRC, UNHCR, and so forth, very good. But more importantly, what can we do to prevent conflicts from arising in the first place? So this was a question I was really living with. And as a Buddhist, our aim is, how can we alleviate suffering of all sentient beings, right? That is one of the fundamental sort of objective or aspiration that we have, yes? That how can we alleviate suffering? And not only of humans, but of all sentient beings. And when you see a war zone, war destroys human life, yes, but it also destroys animal life, vegetal life, environment, everything's destroyed. Yeah. So seeing that, I was asking myself, how can I contribute to preventing these conflicts before they happen? So I started looking at what are the alternatives to the current economic model, because I was convinced, and I still am, that a lot of the problems we are facing today is connected with an unsustainable and unfair economic model. And so that's how I came across gross national happiness. And I was very impressed when I first read and heard about it, and I thought, you know, this is the only example that we have of a whole country trying to go a different development route than most of the other countries are going. So I got very interested in that, and at that time I was still in Geneva at the Red Cross, and the Gross National Happiness Center had just been created, and they were looking for a program director. So by chance or accident or karma or whatever you want to know name call it, yes, auspicious coincidence, yes, I came across this, this opening of this position, and when I read what was expected, I thought, oh, that's exactly for me. These are exactly the competencies that I happen to have developed throughout my career.
Doctor, anything else that you would like to share about your decision and coming to work here at the GNH Center?
When I decided to come here to work to Bhutan, of course I had to consult on one hand my family, because I have children and grandchildren living in Switzerland, have an old mother living in France, so I had to make sure that everybody was supporting me, and they were supporting me, which was very nice. And I also went to consult my teacher, so Master Thich Nhat Hanh, to get his, his blessing, so to say, because I have great faith in his wisdom. And he encouraged me very strongly, saying that in his view, gross national happiness was a way to bring the ideals and the values of Buddhism into society. So he was very supportive of it. And actually he was even willing to, to come and visit me here, yes, but unfortunately his health has not permitted it.
Yes. I keep sharing about little updates of his health as well on my page, because I'm a huge fan of the master as well. Anything else that doctor would like to share about? Because going back to the milestone question, is there anything that doctor can share with us, if it's not too intrusive of us to ask about your experience and meeting with Master Thich Nhat Hanh?
Oh yes, I'm happy to share about it. Interestingly enough, although I have a Vietnamese background myself, as I told you, I first started, my first experiences in Buddhism were in the context of Vajrayana Buddhism, then later in Japanese Zen Buddhism, and also, so I really, I went and met many different masters in many different traditions, because I never felt that I had found my teacher, my root teacher. And in 1982, I went back to Vietnam for the first time after the war. The war had ended in 1975, and I met my family that I had not seen for many years because of the war. And several of my uncles and cousins were students of Master Thich Nhat Hanh. And they told me, oh, you're so lucky because you live in Europe, you can have direct access to our masters anytime. And I was so embarrassed because I didn't know him. I had not yet heard about him. And so when I came back to Europe, I wrote him a letter, and he invited me, and then I went to visit his monastery, and I spent some time with him. And it was one of these life-changing experiences. I remember sitting in one of the first teaching that he was giving, and actually it was a teaching on no coming, no going, no birth, no death. So, and I sat there and I started crying. And it's not because I was sad, not at all. I was actually very happy. But it touched my heart so deeply, It was something like I had the feeling if my heart opened for and I had the feeling that until then, my knowledge of Buddhism had been a bit theoretical, a bit abstract, a bit intellectual. But when I met with him, I had the feeling he was like an embodiment of all these virtues, and that suddenly I understood what compassion really was. And it was so, such a deep emotion to experience that, like a direct transmission of that is compassion, that I was so deeply moved, and it was really a feeling of coming home. And so, yes, so then the relationship was quite obvious, and I became his student, and yeah, I've been so ever since.
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing that experience with us. Doctor, now speaking about GNH and the H in GNH, happiness.
Yes.
If Doctor can share something with us about happiness, what is happiness to
yes.
Doctor?
Well, if I may, I would like to speak first about unhappiness, about suffering.
Please do.
Because, as we know, Buddha's teaching starts with suffering. And I believe that if we don't understand the nature of suffering, then we cannot gain true happiness. So I don't want to become too philosophical about that. But just looking at the situation of our world, I would say I see three fundamental sources of unhappiness. Because of the lifestyle and the materialism and the speed and all that, most people have become disconnected from themselves. They don't have time to, look inward, to take time to reflect, to really ask themselves what is truly important and things like that. So one is chasing away, like rat race, earn more, work more, buy more, consume more, throw more, and so on and so forth. So people have become disconnected from themselves. And that's the first great source of suffering. And you could, from a Buddhist point of view, you said it's ignorance. Not knowing yourself is the ultimate ignorance. Not knowing this book or that book, that's secondary ignorance. But not knowing yourself, that's primary ignorance. Because of this ignorance of themselves, this disconnect, people feel actually unease. They don't feel really well, although they might have everything they want. Especially I've lived in Switzerland, in rich countries, people have everything they want. But they feel unease, there's something missing, constantly something missing. And then, advertising and so tells them, buy this, buy that, then you will be happy. No. So they buy it, and it doesn't really last very long, right? New iPhone, new car, new this, new that. You're happy for a few days, and then it's not new anymore. And, So anyway, so this creates a kind of greed, disconnection. With yourself creates a greed. And this greed creates competition, because each one wants to have more than its fair share. So the others becomes competitor, which is the basis of modern economy, competition and profit, right? And this disconnects us from one another. So instead of, having a compassionate, caring society, we have a competitive society where you have to be stronger, richer, faster, whatever than the others. More famous, more whatever. So that's the second disconnection. And that's connected with greed. And greed gives rise to violence. And because, if the other are in competition with me, then we can start fighting. So the three poison of the mind, ignorance, greed, and hatred. And this we observe in our relationship not only with one another, but with nature. This is why we're destroying nature. So these are the three big disconnects. Disconnect from ourselves, disconnects from one another, disconnected from nature. Now, what is happiness? Happiness is living in harmony with oneself, knowing oneself, living in harmony with one another. So experiencing the others as our fellow sentient beings, brothers and sisters, including non-human, and living in harmony with nature. So for me, happiness is really rooted in these three harmonies: with oneself, with one another, society, other human beings, and with nature.
It can't be more different, Doctor. Doctor spoke to us about happiness, but now the national happiness, the gross national happiness. If we would like to hear from Doctor, what is gross national happiness to you, and how does it inspire you? Anything related to gross national happiness in Doctor's words?
Well, for me, what I've just shared about my understanding of happiness is actually, when you take that seriously, you realize that happiness cannot only be an individual thing. This relationship, harmonious relationship with self, others, and nature is not something that belongs to the individual alone. It belongs to the whole of society. So a happy society, in my view, is a society where these things are cultivated. And I think in Bhutan, because of the very strong tradition, Buddhist tradition that is still alive, there is at least opportunity for people to look inward, to think about deeper values just beyond material success. So this is possible. I think that Bhutan is a society where solidarity, community is by and large still alive. So again, you know, this connection is by and large still there. Maybe in Thimphu less than in the rural areas, but still, you know, it's a society, you know, coming from having lived in many, many countries in my life. When I come to Bhutan, I feel there's something gentle, kind in the people, in their relationship, you know, that you don't find in so many places. Well, you know what the pristine nature of Bhutan is like, you know, it's quite unique, you know. So I think they are the conditions, the given conditions are still quite good. Now, I'm not saying this is not challenging, because really trying to develop the country, which is of course necessary, to develop the country, to modernize the country, and yet not losing, you know, these beautiful values, this social solidarity, without destroying the nature, is not an easy task. But I think so far Bhutan has done pretty well, you know, if you compare it with many other countries in the region. But it is a tightrope walk, no doubt, you know, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing. But I think that the vision of gross national happiness as a goal, as a development paradigm, is a guiding star. It's like a North Star. You know, when you want to go north, you look where's the North Star and you can follow that. Of course, you will never reach completely north. Most of us will never go to the North Pole. Still, we know what is north if we have the guiding star. GNH is a guiding star. So it's not perfect. You cannot say, okay, it's a GNH society, everything's... No, you know, we all know there are problems, you know, from youth employment to many others, of course. But it's a country that has a clear vision and a guiding star. And I think that's really the wisdom of your kings.
Buddhist values and Buddhism, what role do you think that plays in GNH?
I think that's something very interesting, because on one hand GNH is something secular, and I'm convinced that you can apply GNH in any country. In Bhutan, I believe what makes it more easy is that the Buddhist values support this kind of approach. For instance, the idea of contentment, right? That you don't need to go after all your desires, and you know, we know from the Buddha that, you know, greed and desire is one of the main source of suffering. So if people grew up with this kind of ideas that, you know, greed and desire is not only positive, that it brings a lot of suffering, then it's easier to find contentment with what we have. So, for instance, that's a Buddhist value that supports GNH. And we think of, you know, the will to bring happiness and well-being to all sentient beings. That's a very fundamental Buddhist value, but it's also a GNH value. You know? So I think there are overlaps, and the Buddhist values support GNH, although GNH in itself doesn't have to be Buddhist. 2 years ago, we organized a inter-religious dialogue here in Thimphu with religious leader from Islam, Christianity, Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist from various schools, to discuss, you know, how would GNH look like in your context? And there was quite a strong consensus that yes, you know, even with the values of Christianity or Islam or Hinduism, you could create a system similar to GNH.
Now, within GNH and the work that Doctor does, a call to care, share with us what this curriculum is about and how is it progressing?
So that's a very interesting program. Before coming to Bhutan from many years back, I had a strong connection with the so-called Mind and Life Institute, which is the institute that was set up by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, where scientists and Buddhist practitioners or contemplative practitioners meet together to discuss, you know, what are the similarities and the differences between insights and wisdom that is gained through scientific research and insight and wisdom that is gained through traditional wisdom and meditation, contemplation. So this has existed for 30 years, and there's been a lot of books published as outcome of these dialogues. Now, about 3 years ago, His Holiness said, no, we have been researching so long, now it's time to also put it into practice. And he gave a number of areas of priorities, and one of them was education. So, you know, he asked the people working around Mind and Life, both scientists and also Buddhist scholars, so if we wanted to implement in schools the knowledge and the wisdom that we gain throughout these dialogues, so what would be the right way and where should be the priority? And so a working group has been had been set up. I was part of this working group, and we looked at the different pedagogical systems and also the alternatives. So three things I would say seemed most interesting. One thing was the practice of mindfulness in schools. The second one was so-called social and emotional learning. So not only to develop not only the intellectual capability of the children, but also their relational, emotional, decision-making capabilities, like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, creating good relationships and things like that, so social skills. And thirdly, we found out that compassion, is really the core value that needs to be developed in all, from kindergarten to university and everywhere. It's not a Buddhist thing, it's a human thing. Without compassion, we cannot live as human beings. And there's a lot of scientific evidence now that underlies this idea. So then a group worked for a number of years to try to start developing a curriculum, and this curriculum is called a call to care, and its objective is to develop mindfulness and compassion in the schools in a secular way, although behind it there are some Buddhist values, but it's in a secular way to enhance this social and emotional skills in children, with focusing on compassion and what we call the three modes of care. One is receiving care, realizing that any moment of our life is only possible because so many beings are constantly working for us, giving us, doing for us, from our parents to our teachers to the weaver who has woven this go, to the person who has planted the potatoes that you will eat tonight. And so constantly the whole universe is caring for you. And so often we only think of what we miss, but we forget to be grateful for all the things, all the gifts that we receive at any given time of our life. So receiving care. The second one is self-care, and like practices like mindfulness, meditation, and so on. It's a way to take good care of ourselves in a positive way, not in an egoistic way, but in a good way. And if we can take good care of ourselves, then we can extend care to others. So the three modes of care are receiving care, self-care, and then caring for others. Nice. So the program is around these three modes. Now we have started with some pilot schools. One is ELC here in Thimphu, Early Learning Center. Another one is Punakha Higher Secondary School. We have started with teacher training programs, trying out and fine-tuning. And our hope is to gradually assess that and then be able to spread that in the context of the education for GNH. So that's the Bhutanese side of it. And the Vietnamese side of it, we are developing a Vietnamese call to care program that is already rolling out in one province that will be assessed in June. And the Ministry of Education in Vietnam is interested to spread it to all the schools of Vietnam.
Here in Bhutan, how long has it been since this has been implemented in these model schools?
We are just at the beginning. We had the first meeting with the we had a group of 4 Bhutanese who came with us to the US. That's in Amherst University near Boston. That was just last July. There was somebody from ELC, the principal of Punakha Higher Secondary School, one of the directors of Ministry of Education. So a small group of Bhutanese came and we did ourselves a training there. Yeah. And now we're in the process, we have started now, working with the teacher, and the implementation in the school has not started yet. So it's really just the beginning of the process. Yeah.
Given doctors' vast experience in education around the globe, what are your thoughts on what education is? And are there any countries or regions that stand out in your opinion with their education system?
By and large, worldwide, there is actually a disconnect between most of the educational system and the needs of our time. The educational system that you will find almost everywhere in the world date back to industrial age, 19th century, and were designed to meet the needs of 19th century society. Therefore, the schools are like factories. Everybody goes through the same process at the same time, like like an assembly line. And we want to have a standardized product at the end, like a factory product. But human beings are not standard products. So in most educational systems, we lack the ability to really help the specific genius, I might say, of each child to flourish. We want them to become all exactly the same. That's one problem. The second problem of education, it's almost everywhere focusing almost only on the intellect, on academic skills. While we know from research that actually emotional skills and social skills are at least as important as intellectual skills in order to be a happy and flourishing human being. Nobody would expect a child to be able to solve mathematical problems without having learned. So we teach them. But we expect from everyone to have social and emotional skills without teaching it. So it just happened by chance, because we're not systematically training it, except if we are doing a Buddhist training, where we are training also not only intellect, but also the emotion and so on and so forth, training the mind in larger sense. So I think that that's one. Another problem that I see is that because it's 19th century society, it was made to replicate social system of the time, meaning uneducated, they work with their hands, right? Those who are half educated, they are managing like let's say the factory, and the really bright ones, they don't do anything with their hands. So we have tend to believe that intellectual work is very noble and handwork is very sort of second class. And that's a very wrong attitude, very, very wrong attitude. When we speak of unemployment of youth, it's not that there's not enough work, but the kind of work the youth expect, they don't find. Because if you're educated, you expect to sit in an office behind a computer, as if that was the only way to work. And so many things that are useful to society could be done. So I think we need to look again. And good examples are Switzerland, Germany. They have excellent vocational training. Therefore, they are the countries with the lowest youth unemployment. Because in Switzerland, I know I've lived there many years, it's not considered second class to become a good handworker, a good artisan, to become a good carpenter, to become a good plumber. It's very noble work if you do it well.
There's dignity of labor there.
Dignity of labor. We have lost that in most countries, including Bhutan, if I may say, where we think, manual worker, it's for the uneducated.
Yes.
Educated people, they sit in the office and they expect a government job, if possible. So I think, regaining the dignity of labor, of manual work, that can be really high quality manual work, that would be one thing. Another country that has managed very well in education is Finland. Why? Because in many countries, you go to teacher training college if you were not able to go to a better university. In Finland, teacher training college is one of the most selective university. Only the best and the brightest become teacher. And that's the way it should be. If you think, what is really important in society is educating the youth. Therefore, the teachers should have the highest position in society. Also the best salaries. A banker earns a lot of money, but what use is a banker to society? It's okay, a little bit of use, yes, but not that useful.
Because an educator makes the banker also.
Definitely, and all the others.
All the others.
And we tend to think, university professor, that's very high. Kindergarten teacher, that's low class. It's the contrary, because I've been a university professor, I know the way I can influence young people is very limited. But when you work with young children, you are planting seeds that will have an effect all through the whole life. So it's also the way we consider the teaching profession that should change.
I'm grateful for the fact that I am doing what I am doing right now, and it's all thanks to the education system. But then again, there was a lot of battles that I personally had to go through to get at where I am at. And one of the problems that I find along the lines of what Doctor was speaking about, with the dignity of labor, and then about teachers in Finland, the best the cream of the society being recruited as teachers. I feel that our education system in a way doesn't really prepare us there is no career counseling as well. I mean, like about what I can be later on. And I feel that also in a way tends to affect, because by the time I reach class 10 or 12, and if I don't qualify for a government school and if my parents cannot afford my education outside, then I am kind of compelled to go and find a job, which is an injustice to me because I am not doing what I want to do. But more importantly, it creates a bigger discontent situation where if I'm a service provider, then the people who are availing the services are not getting good service. I mean, just expressing a little idea about, I mean, my opinion about the education system here. So anything that...
The last thing I would see as very important is it possible to create a very strong and high quality vocational training system in Bhutan, as I was mentioning, as it exists, for instance, in Switzerland and Germany? Because I don't think that is even a goal that one should wish to attain, that everybody becomes university graduates, because so many things have to be done by hand, you know. And again, dignity of labor and really training high quality artisans is something that is very, very useful in a society. So I think that but that's also a shift of mindset. That otherwise, now parents would be discouraged if their children cannot go to university. They experience it as a failure, you know. So how can we change that so that people can be proud? My son is best carpenter ever, the best joiner, whatever, you know, and is proud of it, you know.
And a call to care, I hope, is doing that in a sense, because we are starting from kindergarten. So even if this generation we miss out, then we have a generation which is growing up who's going to be proud to be working with wood and stones. Doctor, I'm about done with my questions and we are almost out of time as well. Before I conclude, when we go live, and a recurring question that viewers both on TV as well as online ask us is if there is a shortcut to Nirvana. So with your vast experience and knowledge, what is your response to this question?
Well, the idea of a shortcut to Nirvana is the idea that Nirvana is somewhere else, because you only need a shortcut to go somewhere. From a Zen perspective, Nirvana is here and now, so you don't need a shortcut, you're in it already. The problem is to become aware that you're in it.
Plus, this has to be one of the best answers I've got for my question. I've asked this question to all my guests. Finally, is there like a daily sadhana or a method that doctor practices or teaches that our viewers could incorporate in our day-to-day lives?
Well, at the GNH office, we start every morning with a practice of mindfulness. So mindfulness practice is something very simple that anyone can do, and it has three basic components. The first one is awareness of the body. So that when we sit in mindfulness, we have a complete awareness of our body. We feel the weight of our body on the ground, our back is upright and yet relaxed, our head is upright yet relaxed. So the body is in such a way that it is at the same time conscious and upright and relaxed. Then the second awareness is the breathing. So mind and body actually are one, but most of the time they are completely separated. But if we put our attention on breathing, then mind and body are together. So just simply as we breathe in, we are aware that we are breathing in, and we are breathing out, we are aware that we are breathing out. Putting the attention on the tip of the nose, or just feeling the air moving. You can also put the attention on the lower belly, feel the movement. But it's simply being aware of the breathing all through the breathing process. Breathing in all the way, then the turning point, breathing out all the way, turning point. So these are the two first awareness of body, awareness of the breathing. Once our mind settles, we can start to try to be aware of the mind. In a way that, to take an image, the mind is like an ocean, like a lake, vast and deep. And on the surface of the lake, there are ripples and waves. These are thoughts, emotions, perceptions. They come and they go. They come from the mind and they return from the mind in the same way that the wave comes from the water and returns from to the water. So we don't have to do anything about it. It's already mind. So it's not about rejecting it, not clinging to it, just observing. A thought arises from the mind, returns from the mind. A wave arises from the lake and returns to the lake. And when the surface of a lake is very still, it becomes like a mirror. Therefore it can reflect the sky, the trees, the mountain, without distorting it. When our mind is very quiet, it perceives reality as it is, without distorting it. So we are aware of our body, we are aware of our breathing, we let the mind settle so that it can reflect reality as it is. And when a thought arises, it's just like a wave on the ocean, we let it go again, and then again the mind settles. And when we do that, there's no more regret of the past, no fear of the future, and we can fully enjoy the present moment. And we can realize that this moment is a miracle. We are alive. It's a most incredible miracle. We are alive, here and now. And this is happiness.
Doctor, would you put a time limit to this, like for our viewers, that you say that, okay, do this for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or you just go by the flow?
Generally speaking, I would say, as a beginner, it's good to do short, but very regular.
Is there a sitting position that one should maintain or sit in?
Myself, like most practitioners, sit in lotus or half lotus. But in the end, what is really important is not so much the lotus or half lotus, but to sit in such a way that the back is upright, because otherwise the energy channels are blocked. If you sit like that, it's no good. If you sit like that, it's no good. It really has to be open. Yeah? And the back of the neck has a little bit open, little pushing. So the most important with the position, it should be comfortable and stable.
Doctor, I read a GNH article that Doctor had written, and Doctor shared 3 numbers there. If Doctor could share those 3 numbers, I know it's getting cold and chilly as well, but like a final call to care or a call to wake up as well. Maybe these 3 numbers could do that for our viewers.
Yes, so the first number is 1.5. Yes. 1.5, why? Because today, as we speak, we are using up 1.5 planets. It means that the planet needs 18 months to produce what mankind is consuming in 1 year. So we use 1.5 planets, we only have 1. And that's the first challenge. The second is 2. There are 2 million people dying every year from malnourishment, poverty. And it wouldn't have to be, because we have enough for everyone. It's just because we don't distribute in a fair way. And the third one is 1 million. 1 million is the number of people who die by suicide every year, which is more than all the people who die through wars and armed conflicts. And this shows the disconnection that we have with ourselves.
Doctor, a final closing remark? Anything that Doctor would like to share before I conclude the show?
Maybe I would like to say something to the youth in Bhutan.
Yes.
I think you might, I don't know if you realize, but I hope you do, that being born as a young Bhutanese is at the same time a special privilege and a special responsibility. A privilege because you live in a country that is really a shining star for the world, a beacon of hope for the world. And that is a country where you have tradition, nature, a society that is still by and large healthy, an enlightened leadership that shows you the way. And it's a responsibility, because this, I would like to say, this jewel of the Himalaya is in your hands. And it is your responsibility to bring it forth in such a way that your children and their children will still be able to enjoy it the way you have been able to enjoy it, because your forefathers have done their part to preserve it.
We are 24/7 now, so stay tuned. From the production team here in what is turning out to be cold Shambhala Apartments lawn, this is your host Karma Dendrup and the production team here, And from everybody here at the BBS channel too, we would like to thank you for watching, and don't forget our Jangchub Shing slogan, which is analyze and realize.